everyone! So today's video is going to be a follow-up video to a video I made quite a while back, and that was things no one tells you about pregnancy. So today's video is going to be things no one tells you about childbirth. If you don't already know me, my name is Danielle. I have 3 children. 2 were born at home, 1 was born in a birth center. I also work as a doula, so I do have some first-hand experience with seeing birth and quite a few of them now. I also have a lot of friends who have told me their stories, as well as read a lot of books, and these were all things that I feel like I would have really appreciated knowing ahead of time. Now, all of these things that I say, they may or may not have happened to you, or they may not happen to you. I did really want to bring some unique things to the table. I know there's already quite a few videos up like this, so I definitely wanted to hopefully have you leave this video feeling like you learned something that you haven't heard before. And again, just because I experienced it or somebody I know experienced it doesn't mean that you will experience it this way, but these are just some things that maybe you can relate to, or maybe you will feel super relieved when you do go into labor and it happens to you and you already know that it's something that women super commonly experience. The first thing I'm going to be talking about is the blood. So I'm not actually referring to the blood after the baby is born and during delivery. I'm actually referring to bleeding during the first stage of labor, which is when your cervix is dilating. Now, I had no idea that there can actually be a fair amount of blood during this time period. I was a little bit freaked out by how much bleeding I experienced, like really early on into my active labor, and my labor with both of my daughters, my first 2 children, actually started with the mucus plug as well as bloody discharge. That wasn't that much of a surprise to me, but what was a surprise to me was throughout the labor I felt like I was bleeding a lot, and it was especially so with my first. I feel like it's because it was the first time it was opening up. Some women will have more or less of this. Not everyone will have the same amount. My third birth, I hardly had any bleeding at all up until the very, very end. But my first, I was actually freaked out and I was worried that something was wrong. But my midwife, of course, was lovely and was sure to assure me that it was completely normal and it was just because everything was opening up and ripening up. It's a bit like a mini period, but more mucousy. The next thing I wanted to talk about is contractions can be super irregular even into active labor. I feel like people do not talk about this often enough, and a lot of caregivers will discourage women, especially if they aren't aware that contractions can be super irregular, even in transition and even like just moments before the baby is born. With all of my children, I was extremely worried that I was always making progress and then I would have contractions that would just, you know, be super far apart again. It happened throughout the entire course of all 3 of my labors. I would have contractions every 10 minutes, and then I would have contractions every 5 minutes, and then I would have a contraction that's 3 minutes apart, then I would have a contraction that's like 7 minutes from the last one, and it would just be like all over the place. And not everyone will have that, but I personally have experienced it that way, and I know a lot of other women who have had things like this happen too. Maybe contractions have been 3 minutes apart consistently, and then you randomly have one that's like 5 or 7 minutes apart. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily going back in progress. Your body just has its own way of opening up and doing things. So my biggest tip in that realm is to try not to get too discouraged if you see your contractions kind of going up and all over the place, and don't be surprised too if you have some really strong ones that you might have one really soon after that's like a bit of an aftershock, and you might be confused and feeling like you're going back on the progress scale again. It just doesn't work like that. Your body is really intelligent and it has its own way of opening up, and there's no reason to stress over numbers. As a matter of fact, I'd highly recommend not timing most of your contractions unless you're trying to decide if you want to go to the hospital or not. Like, honestly, I would just not even bother timing. You can tell you're in active labor and that the baby's coming based on how you feel. The third one that I really wish someone would have told me is that your waters do not have to break and you can safely deliver a baby with the waters intact. It is extremely rare. It happens only 1 in 90,000 births, but it did happen to me my first birth. Olivia, my daughter, she was born in the caul is what it's called, and some cultures actually believe it is to bring good luck or good fortune to the child, and I was just confused, like, why isn't my waters breaking? And I was pretty sure, like, I felt like a little bit of fluid come out, and I was like, oh, okay, that was probably my waters. And then my midwife was like, no, I think that actually it's still intact. And I also wish she would have told me the significance before my daughter was born, because I had absolutely no idea that this was even a possibility or that it was something rare or special. So I kind of wish that I would have taken a closer look at the call. I would have liked to maybe take some pictures of it. Actually, it's a little bit of a bummer now thinking back in retrospect, because it's completely natural, it's completely normal and safe to deliver a baby in their amniotic sac, but I didn't really get to take that in because I had no idea. I just thought, okay, she's coming out in her sac. I guess it's normal, but it's rare. So I wish that I would have known that. Definitely talk to your care provider about that, because it's something that fascinates me now, especially as a doula. So your waters don't have to break. I know everyone talks about the poo. So what I'm going to say here is you might not poop. Yes, a lot of women do poop, but you also might not poop. I have had 3 children now, and I pooped with 2 of them, and my third one I didn't. And kind of the reason why I think I didn't poop with my third is because your body actually does go through a slight kind of process of just releasing everything before you go into labor for some women. And I think especially since I was a vegan this time, everything just really came out beforehand and during the active labor stage. So by the time it was time to push, only a baby came out. Now, it doesn't matter when or how you poop in your labor, and I don't really think that it's a big deal. I know a lot of women think it's like terrifying and humiliating, but I think most people can agree that when you're having a baby, I think the least thing you're worrying about is whether or not you're pooping. The only thing is it does get a little bit smelly, but I really don't think it's a big deal. I really don't think it's that surprising that you would poop, since you're basically pushing, and a lot of the pressure you feel is in your rectum area actually. So yes, you might poop and you might not poop. Now, this could just be a completely individual thing for me. Everyone experiences their labor sensations differently. Some women feel it more in their back, some just feel it all in the belly and in the cervix region or in their vagina. For me, all of the pressure was in my butt. Now, I have hardly ever heard anyone talk about this. I don't know if it's the positioning of my cervix, but all of my labors, I swear that I have felt most of my contractions in the buttocks area. And I haven't heard a lot of people say that, obviously during the pushing stage, but I mean, we're talking from the beginning to the end. I'm just feeling like I have to poo like the whole time. And it also like is the most painful in my rectum area compared to any other area. So you might feel labor in your butt. Okay, one of my favorite ones to talk about is you can actually get a nice breather during your labor and delivery between the first and second stage. So after transition, which is the most intense part, I found it's when your cervix is dilating from either 8 to 10 or 9 to 10. It's just, there's a lot of contractions on top of each other. There's a huge adrenaline boost because you're getting ready to move into the pushing stage. There is a time period where you might get a break. Now, you might not, you might just get the urge to push like straight once you get to 10, which happened to me my second 2 times. But with my first, let me tell you, my first was definitely my most easy and sort of gentle birth out of all 3 of my births. With my first, I actually did experience this, and it was pure bliss, let me tell you. I had the shortest transition ever. It really wasn't that bad. I had like 2 or 3 transition contractions. I could even talk through them. Like, one of the midwives was kind of getting on my nerves, so I just got up and left. And the second I got up and just had a moment to myself, I realized I am not in any more pain. That is so great. I feel like so normal, and I felt like pretty tired, but also a little bit euphoric at the same time. And I was confused a little bit too, but then I remember I actually did read up on this beforehand, so it wasn't anything too scary for me. Like, I wasn't worried if I wasn't making any more progress. I was actually feeling quite calm, and I was taking in that break. So if you happen to get a break in between transition and pushing, take full advantage of it, because you're going to need it for that next part. Next up is your body produces natural sources of pain relief by exuding high levels of endorphins. So if you don't know what endorphins are, if you've ever had a really good workout, afterwards you might notice that your mood is better, you're feeling great, you might be feeling like you're a little bit on a high, like a happy high. Your endorphins are in hyperdrive, especially if you are in a calm environment and you are getting a lot of positive attention from your partner or from, you know, just a safety network of people. You should be getting quite a good dose of endorphins to help you get through your labor. So definitely staying calm and being safe. You might be able to experience your body's natural pain relief kicking in a little bit easier. So just keep that in mind. Your body actually does create something to help you get through this intense process. Speaking of intense, labor can be extremely strenuous on the body. If you have ever pushed yourself really hard on a workout, like you've done like a really exhausting HIIT or something like that, and then afterwards you felt a little bit like you had to puke, labor can sometimes make you vomit. So it's pretty normal. It hasn't happened to me, but I've seen it happen very often. It's really just because your body's working super hard. Also, your digestion slows down quite a bit, and you may notice that you don't have much of an appetite anyway. It's a good idea to just kind of nibble on things here and there. You can eat if you're really hungry. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just be aware that your digestion might be a little slow, and you might be a little bit more likely to vomit just because your body's just working it. So a symptom that's actually more of a symptom after delivery, you might get kind of like a really intense tremor or shake, like where your whole body is like shaking and trembling uncontrollably. Now it's a little bit more common with people who had a lot of medication, but it can happen if you haven't had a lot of medication too. Again, it's just because your body worked so incredibly hard. It can be from like fluid shifts in the body as well. There's a lot of reasons for why this happens, and it usually subsides after anywhere from a couple minutes to a couple hours, and it's completely normal, nothing to worry about. But it might be a little overwhelming, and you might be feeling a little bit more emotional for that reason. But just try to relax and, like, you know, bundle up, ask people to give you some extra blankets because you might be feeling a little bit shivery as well. I mean, hopefully not too cold because that can be an indication of something more serious, but just ask people to kind of hold you and bundle you up because you just did something pretty intense and you definitely deserve some snuggles. So the last one I'm going to talk about today, and it's definitely my favorite, and that is that birth can be euphoric. Birth runs off of what is called the love hormone, and it is also the hormone that got your baby here. It is oxytocin. It is the same hormone that was used to create the baby. This hormone is just being released at super high dosages to help open up your cervix and get the baby out, but also to ensure bonding and that you and the baby connect after birth. There are a lot of hormones in birth, but the primary ones are oxytocin and endorphins, especially in the first stage. Adrenaline does come into play in the second stage, but these hormones really are like the center force in keeping you going, but also keeping you in kind of, I like to call it an otherworldly state. I think it's kind of necessary to kind of get rid of the critical mind during this stage because we don't need that in labor. What we really need is to just be feeling present, taking advantage of our breaks, and it's usually you experience those feelings in between contractions. It feels like you're on another planet, and it can be difficult to answer questions sometimes. It just puts you in a total other state. It's very deeply spiritual in my experience. I think that birth hormones are as close as it gets to what other people try to use, like marijuana and stuff like that for, to kind of just like escape reality, you know what I mean, and just feel kind of floaty. I'd say it's probably pretty close to that. Now, I don't have any personal experience with marijuana or drugs, and hardly any with alcohol as well, but based on what other people have told me, it kind of sounds like that a little bit. And from what I've seen from movies, people kind of get this like dazed look. You will see a lot of women get this sort of dewy kind of trance-like state when they're really, really in and fully immersed, and it's a lot easier to access this way of being through, again, a nice, cozy, dark environment. Ask women minimal questions, don't have too many strangers come into the picture, and you're gonna see. That is everything that I have. I hope that I told you something different. I hope that it gave you some peace of mind, because I didn't want to have too many scary ones in there, because birth can be such a positive experience. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe. I make quite a few videos about birth and periods if this kind of content interests you. I'm also a vlogger, and I vlog my expat life in Germany. I'm from California, but I live in Germany with my 3 kids. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're interested in more from us, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!